2024 has been a wild reading year so far, so it's stats time to dive into all of that. I have my notebook and my phone here, so I might be looking down, and I'm going to start straight off. So far, as of the end of June this year, I'd read 109 books, 31,345 pages, also 456 hours of audiobooks. Those numbers are all massive compared to what I had read at the end of 2023, let alone halfway through the year. So I read like 80 books in total last year, listened to like maybe 150, 200 hours of audiobooks. My pages was like 20,000 something by the end of the year, so this is the most ridiculous reading year I have ever had in my life. Not mad, bit confused how it's happening, not about to complain about it. So let's, using the stats that I've gotten up on my phone, dive into what actually happened with my reading stats. First of all, my reading method. I was reading a lot of audiobooks, so I wasn't sure how much this was going to be. Turned out it was 32% of the books that I read is via audiobook. That's a fair shout, that is a third of my books, and 50% of them were physically. So I've read a lot more ebooks than I was expecting to have read this year. I didn't think I was really reading any, but obviously that is wrong. So mainly physical, which is my preference because I own a lot of physical books. I need to get through them. So I would like it to stay at least 50, if not higher. Then looking at my series stats, so 58% of the books that I have been reading are standalone books, which I find very interesting because I have quite a few series on my TBR that I'm trying to get through, and I'm still reading mainly standalones. Now I have started 14 new series, which is fairly high, but some of those were arcs that were sent out to me and stuff like that, and also I've read 27 sequels, so that's not too bad. I'm still doing that. I've finished 6 series and I've DNF'd 2, so I don't think that's too bad. Could be much worse, could be much worse. Then we have the genre. So I read from 16 different genres, but the two main percentages is fantasy and non-fiction. One of those is a bit more surprising than the other. The non-fiction is 17%, and it's the second highest and the only other real notable one. There's a couple of like classics and sci-fi, but like non-fic. And then fantasy is 45% of my reading. I keep saying that I'm trying to read sci-fi, and I need to be hauling in more sci-fi if this is my goal, because I don't have much sci-fi to read on my shelves, so it's just not happening. What? How dare you? Get back up there. Free Palestine. And as for the length of the books that I'm reading, oh my god, is there a big pace. Now obviously there's quite a few small ones here. I did do, if you want to watch it up there, a reading vlog where I read as many of my smallest books as I could in one day, and I got through a lot of them. That was like a 1,100 page plus reading day. So that is part of the reason for the big boost. But then also, yeah, I do have quite a few books in that like high 200, low 300 mark. But at least I do have some that are kind of heading up at the higher ends, so I do have some bigger books. And in terms of how I have acquired the books that I've been reading, 48% of the books that I have been reading I have already owned. Thank God for that. I need that to be at least 50 because I'm somehow still bringing in more books, even though I'm on a book buying ban. I am still... It's one with many caveats, and those caveats then mean I'm getting a lot more books coming into my life. And 17% of the books that I've been reading is arcs. And that's because I've had a lot more. I'm just categorising arcs as anything that is sent to me by a publisher, which is not quite accurate, but also I am usually getting these finished copies before they actually go out and are published. So technically they're arcs. Look, it's just a way to categorise them. 17% of them come from publishers or from NetGalley. So that's a fairly high amount, and it's been wild this year. It's been like so much fun to be involved in all of these like marketing pushes. It's so fun. The most common publishing year, 2024. 25% of the books that I've read have come out this year. I think that is a mixture of those books from publishers and the NetGalley arcs, and also I have read some of my Goldsborough books that have come in, finally, as well as some of the other books that have come into my life this year. I've made sure to read some of them, so I'm fairly happy with that. In the age category, I always find this one really interesting because when I first started tracking, YA and adult, YA was like 60 and adult was 40, and it has changed over the years. YA is now 18%, adult is 70. So like I have 11% that is like middle grade and children, and technically new adult as well, but I don't think I've read anything new adult this year. So it's middle grade and children's books, partly because I've been reading some books in foreign languages and I cannot do that in adults. That has to be in children's. But yeah, 70% adult books. Now obviously, like, I am currently 27, like, it does make sense that as a 27-year-old I am reading primarily books aimed at adults, but at the same time, you know, this community is really big on just reading what you want to read, and I am totally down for that, and so loads of people read YA much above the appropriate age. And it's also one of the most heavily marketed brackets of books. Like, YA is huge for marketing, and so I fall for hype quite often, and I'm surprised that YA isn't higher. But I am really pleased that I track this because it shows where my natural inclination is going, and then I can hold the appropriate books in. There's no point when I go back to buying books, buying a load of YA, and then I don't want to read it. Then for representation, so I have disability representation. Half of my books have some form, whether it's the main character or just someone who's present in the book who is disabled. This is a lot more common than the LGBTQ+ rep, where 61% of the books have no representation in them. I don't think this is because I'm looking out for disabled rep. I think that's because people are happier to include, you know, someone with an injury, especially in a fantasy story, like, oh, someone lost an eye to a dragon, oh, someone had their arm cut off in a battle. It feels a lot more natural in fantasy, and so I think that's a fair part of it. I am annoyed that both of these stats are quite low, especially the LGBTQ+ representation. Like, that should be a lot higher, but need to be reading more of those books. It is also, I'm pretty sure, higher than last year, so I am still improving, I think. And then for my authors of colour, so I know that some people aren't keen on the term, but I use people of colour, authors of colour, because it covers every race that is not white. And I have 33% of my authors have been authors of colour. I feel like as someone who lives in Britain, that's not too bad, that's fairly proportional to the population. However, I personally am aiming in my reading to get it up to 50% minimum, because whilst I do live in the UK, I also live on planet Earth. So obviously the books that are marketed to me are primarily aimed at English-speaking audiences and mainly to people who are British. So I will get marketed mostly books intended for this island, but I still do want to actively be searching out more. So I'm working on that one. I wish it was better, but it's also not awful considering what is marketed to me and what I already own. Some of the books that I've read this year I've owned for years, so I'm finally getting through them. The gender split for my reading so far this year has been 55%, and that is the lowest I've ever had with female authors. So 55% are female, and the rest of the percentage is made up of male mixed gender authors or authors that are non-binary or otherwise don't identify with male-female. So yeah, 55% is the lowest I've ever had for female. Now I am reading some more non-binary categorised authors, so that is part of it, but I have read more male authors this year than I have ever read since I was maybe a child. I'm having a fine time of it. My average rating is pretty high, so no issue there, but I don't know how it's happened. Like, it's fine, but considering how heavily skewed I have been towards female authors, where have you come from? Then for nationality. Now, I'm not going to break down every single country. There are quite a few different nationalities. I read 91 different authors, so there's a few nationalities to go through there. However, I read 30% of my authors are English, not British, English. I do read primarily English authors from the British Isles. They are more likely to be published. There are more of them, more people who are English than any of the other nationalities. So I do have some from the rest, but it's 30% English and 33% American. I'm really trying to reduce how much I read from American authors. Nothing against American authors themselves, just the number of them that I'm reading each year is always higher than anything else. And I'm not even American. Like, if I was American, it would make sense. Like, I'm reading the books from my country. No, I'm just reading random books from a country I don't live in. So it's not too far behind. It's 3%, but I do need to work on that, and I don't know how to do it. Figure out eventually. Okay, and then my ratings. We're at the end here for the stats. Ratings. I've had 14% of my books have been 5 stars, which I feel like is fairly high, but not too high. But 48% of them have been 4-star. I've had so many good books. Because of that, my average rating in 2024 so far is 4 stars, rounding up slightly, but 4 stars. That's a ridiculous rating, especially considering I had a few books that I absolutely hated compared to last year where I didn't really read any or many 1 or 2 star books. So yeah, not sure where that's come from. Not mad about it. And those are all of my stats for the first half of this year. Now, I don't want to judge people based on reading loads more than me or less than me or anything like that, so the question I'm going to ask is, what is your most read genre? Potentially you don't have one and you are reading pretty evenly across so many different genres, but most of us have one area that we read mostly in, so I would love to know what that one is for you. Again, for me it was fantasy. If you'd like to see how I manage with my reading stats for the second half of the year and if I manage to do the same again, I don't think I will. I'm probably going to slow down now, but still. Then please do hit the subscribe button down below and I will see you folks in the next video. Bye!